So I'm really grateful to be here. Since Amara has become pastor here, I've looked at your website a few times and have enjoyed seeing some of the beautiful imagery that you're using right now. When she mentioned that the series was on metamorphosis and butterflies, I had to say yes, because butterflies are one of my most favorite things in the world. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to reflect with you all of these beautiful pieces of the service that go so well together. So will you pray with me? Spirit of love and of truth, be with us as we meditate on these themes, ideas, and stories. Give us strength and wisdom as we go from this place after. Amen. So, as you heard in the story, the people were grumbling, complaining. Anyone who has children or spends time around younger folks might be familiar with frequent hungry grumbling. But we do know that this grumbling of the people in the desert was more of a deep hunger. Those wandering in the desert were far from their longtime home. They are hungry and frustrated, and they wish to be back in slavery in Egypt. At least then there was some real food, they say. If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat and ate our fill of bread. For you have brought us into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. The people that left Egypt were aching for freedom, and yet when faced with the disorientation of all that was new and different, many began crying to go back. As they encounter some of these first difficulties of their new journey, different kinds of challenges than the regular rhythm of suffering to which they had become accustomed during their slavery in Egypt. And we ask, was it the hardship of the wilderness that led Israelites to complain? Or was it that the difficulty was new? While none of us have experienced the life of the people in Egypt, we can imagine the fear of the unknown after big changes in our lives. Letting go of the past and stretching toward new ways of being requires deep trust in God's promise to be present and to provide. Maybe we can remember times when we knew we needed change and we were at the threshold, the precipice. Maybe like the butterfly, we had emerged and just begun to stretch our wings, and it became quite clear that there was no going back into that cocoon. The wilderness people knew they really couldn't go back to Egypt. They have to let go of the way things were, leave behind the real food and the limitations of suffering in their lives there. They must look forward to a new way of life. And we know that fear can grow in us in response to the unknown. Perhaps the Israelites, in their fear, thought that the suffering they could recognize was better than the suffering of the unknown. When I was an undergraduate college student, I was convinced I would be pre-med and become a doctor. Having done well in classes in high school, it seemed like the very best way to help people. And of course, doctors have great reputations, are held in esteem, and make a decent living. While chemistry and biology were difficult in my first year of college, I really had a tough time during my second year with organic chemistry. Making it through with a C the first time, definitely not good enough for medical school. And then, because I was so committed to that dream, I took the whole series again, trying to get a better grade. In the process, I lost scholarships because my grades weren't high enough and struggled so much. Late nights studying, nothing clicking. I simply could not make sense of the equations when I had to come to a test and explain it. Looking back, it's hard to see why it took so long or why I didn't try something else sooner. But when we are stuck in our ideas of what makes sense, when we are stuck in what we think is right, we know how difficult making change can be, even if there is possibility of real liberation and freedom from those expectations and struggles. Emerging and opening our wings, making the decision to let go and leave things behind can be very difficult. The unknown does have challenges that might not go our way. Once I let go of my dreams of becoming a doctor, I had to figure out what else I might do. And that led me on my own many-year journey maybe a wilderness wandering, but there have been lots of amazing opportunities and learning experiences. And as we all know, there are lots of ways we can serve one another and help each other. I explored work in many different areas, internships in church-related organizations, seminary, faith-based environmental advocacy, higher education, community partnerships and teaching, and I've spent a year working with End of Life Washington doing community education about end-of-life options. Maybe in the future I'll serve a faith community or do more work with faith-based social justice education. Stretching my wings into all of these possibilities wasn't always easy, and letting go of the idea of a more traditional, stable career with decent income and respect has not been easy all the time. Some of my friends are now surgeons and pediatric heart specialists, and sometimes I look and think of what might have been. But while I was in graduate school, I discovered how much I loved sociology, theology, and biblical studies. And it was a real gift to see how much I connected with those areas of life and work. Looking back, I sometimes regret how much time and struggle I put into those chemistry classes when it just wasn't a good match for me. Leaving behind these challenges, the stressful medical school application process was initially very scary, but it was definitely the right way for me. It gifted me the opportunity to see myself in new ways, to honor the gifts and skills I do have. Vocational journeys can require us to let go of our expectations, either our own or those imposed upon us by family and culture. That can be difficult. There are many other points of decision in our lives where we realize that previous cocoons or structures, patterns, aren't going to work for us anymore. And if we have the real opportunity to leave it behind, we can stretch our wings and begin to let go. I do want to acknowledge that this isn't always obvious, how or when to let go, when we should leave things behind and what to leave behind. And sometimes it's barely realistic or even possible to let go of the expectations or limits of our daily realities. There's very practical ways that we are sometimes limited from letting go of things we would like to. I can't pretend to know the many and various challenges that each person faces, the ways they'd like to let go and move on. For many of us, the challenges might be more spiritual, emotional, mental ways of being that require renewal and letting go of past patterns and behaviors. We might yearn for renewal of relationships and look for ways to let go of harmful societal expectations or expectations of ourselves. The writer and facilitator Adrienne Marie Brown writes in her book Emergent Strategy about how important it is to be adaptive in the midst of change. She and her co-conspirators draw wisdom from nature, just like the metaphor of the butterfly inspiring us in this series. She quotes two others talking about the power of water and fluid adaptability. Brenda Salgado says, "Water has taught me how to be in the flow, to release and cleanse what no longer serves me or us. There is power in letting go of what is not ours to carry, or what others in their unskillfulness have tried to place upon us. I can feel the release when I think about water flowing and cleansing, carrying what is no longer ours to carry." Then she quotes Walida Emerisha, the co-editor of a book with Adrienne Marie Brown called Octavia's Brood, and she speaks about storms. "Nature has taught me about fluid adaptability, about not weathering storms, but using howling winds to spread seeds wide, torrential rains to nurture roots so they can grow deeper and stronger. Nature has taught me that a storm can be used to clear out branches that are dying, to let go of that which is keeping us from growing in new directions. These are the lessons we need. As Octavia taught us, the only truth is change. We will face social and political storms we could not even imagine. The question becomes not just how do we survive them, but how do we prepare so that when we do suddenly find ourselves in the midst of an unexpected onslaught, we can capture the potential, the possibilities inherent in the chaos, and ride it like dawn skimming the horizon. So these images of the flow of water, the powerful image of the storm, spreading seeds, nurturing roots, clearing out dying branches, making things new and allowing for new growth. In the story from Exodus, God gave the Israelites a unique opportunity to learn how to trust God's provision, to be in the flow of God's story, to let go of their expectations of what they had known. In their Egyptian bondage, they had to wait for the pots of meat from their taskmasters. In the wilderness, the people are free of this oppression, and God caused manna to literally appear in the morning dew and quail to come right into the camp, making clear that God's provision is beyond the possibilities of Egypt. They had no concept of what awaited them after this stormy liberation, the dramatic Red Sea crossing. The land into which God was sending them, as well as the food God provided them, was so different, and yet so much more than they had in Egypt. But they didn't know that until they experienced it. The butterfly only knew the stems and leaves as it crawled and feasted upon as a caterpillar. This moment just before it takes flight is so crucial as we learn that while its wings are unfurling, the proboscis, the tube through which the butterfly feeds, is still forming in this precious time of hanging out. Important things are happening even at this moment, right before the butterfly lets go. The new food for the butterfly in the coming days is the sweetness of flower nectar drawn up through its feeding tube rather than chewing the fibrous greenery of leaves and stems. It lets go of what was familiar and emerges into the new. The Israelites only knew the certainty and regularity of slavery. But in this crucial moment after liberation, before entering into the land God is sending them to inhabit, God provides the Israelites a taste of something so much greater than they would have ever had in the past. Sometimes we can be wistful, remembering the bygone days, the days in the before times, before COVID, when we didn't wear masks or weren't concerned about getting sick at community events. Sometimes we can think about things before and think things were better then. We also notice that there was a time when we didn't realize the ways our structures and systems were harming Black and brown people the way we have come to know even more clearly each day. Historian Stephanie Kuntz describes, her book is called The Way We Never Were, as a helpful narrative and a corrective to some of the ways people might look back at the past with longing for something, some certainty, some security, some safety. She points to the ways in which the golden era, supposed golden era of the 50s was only possible due to the booming economy, huge government investments in schools and communities, infrastructure, and social programs. There was incredible job security, and single-income families could rely on well-paid work that allowed for this ideal life. But we know that this was still only true for a portion of people, mostly those with white skin privilege and middle-class realities. We know deeply that systemic injustice has always been true, and life was never safe from illness and harm, that some were always struggling to make life easier for others. But it's so hard. We want to go back, just like the Israelites. It seems like some things were certain or better then, right? Some of us are in situations where we're trying to maintain some sense of control or safety, struggling to make things work, frequently burning ourselves out. In reality, we might need to release the work or our situations to teams, allow communities to support us. To be vulnerable in this way is difficult, but it can be a liberating move. Another story we have in the New Testament of God's provision is the miracle of the loaves and fishes, when Jesus blesses the bread that is shared, and there is enough for everyone. This story reminds us that when we share, when we work together in community, we can weave our strengths together rather than facing the limitations of one individual, ourself, or someone else. to hold the vision, coordinate, and make sure all the details happen, to provide the necessary provision and sustenance or the meals. As Christians, we believe God's provision is enough. The manna and quail provided are the sustenance the Israelites need. The bread and the fish are shared, and there is abundance. Whether or not you see or feel God sustaining you in big life changes, small shifts in your family, losses of loved ones, God is present, and God's provision is enough. I most closely connect with God's presence in the community of friends, family, church that sustain me in various ways when I'm feeling unsure. When I let go of my medical school idea, it was friends who were making other choices that comforted me, provided opportunities to think about what was next. My professor of botany gave me an opportunity to think about environmental biology in new ways. When I have faced other shifts and challenges, letting go of what was, it has been family, friends, church communities that supported me, allowed me to take new pathways forward. Hopefully for many of you, you find support in this community and among other friends, family, and caring folks. It can be vulnerable to reach out and allow ourselves to be sustained by community when we are making a big step forward, when we're going onto the stage with the chicken dance. We can also do this when we let go of harmful patterns and practices, especially as we move into new ways of being community, given the very difficult realities we find ourselves in, with ongoing gun violence in schools and public places, systemic racism in every structure and institution in our society, COVID still present, and other pandemics possibly to come. We simply must rely on each other as we allow ourselves to let go of these former ways, practices, and difficult situations so that we can actively work together against injustice and let go of our former ideas of safety and security. We need each other to do this. So let us lean into community as we move toward flight, leaving the cocoon behind. We are free to let go. Amen.